They laughed when I spoke. My own family. Daniel leaned back in his chair and said it like a sentence. Avery just never had what it takes to serve. The laughter that followed wasn't loud, but it landed like a slap. Even my father didn't stop them. He just stared at his glass, pretending I wasn't there. Something inside me fractured that night, quietly, cleanly, like a bone snapping under skin. I stayed still, smiling like it didn't hurt, but under the table, my phone buzzed, once, then again. 3 short vibrations, one long, a pattern I hadn't felt in years. The same pattern that used to mean, Admiral Collins, we need you. And in that moment, while my family mocked the life they thought I'd thrown away, the world outside this house reminded me exactly who I was. Charleston greeted me with salt in the air and the heavy damp that clings to your skin. 12 years had passed, but the road home hadn't changed. The same oak trees leaning over the water, the same dock sagging beneath the weight of years. My father once called this place the anchor of honor. To me, it always felt like the chain around my neck. The house glowed at the end of the lane. Through the window, I saw them all gathered. My father, back straight despite the years. Daniel, in his crisp reserve uniform, laughing louder than anyone else. Meg, graceful and polite, pouring red wine with a practiced hand. I stepped inside, and the noise faltered, as if the air itself wasn't sure what to do with me. Look who finally made it, Daniel said, his voice balanced between welcome and mockery. Didn't want to miss Dad's big 70, I answered, hanging my coat by the door. My father shook my hand, firm, short, and cold. You made it, was all he said. No questions, no warmth, no mention of the years between us. Dinner began. They talked about promotions, new houses, travel plans. When the focus drifted toward me, Meg smiled politely. Avery works in something with boats, right? Marine systems, mostly logistics, I said. Daniel let out a low whistle. Not the kind of duty that requires a salute, huh? I didn't reply. The scrape of cutlery filled the silence, echoing like static in my head. For a moment, I could almost hear the low hum of an engine beneath storm winds, smell the metal of rain and oil. I gripped my glass tighter, eyes catching my father's framed portrait on the wall, his medals gleaming in perfect rows. Mine was gone. So was I, at least to them. Outside, the wind pressed against the windows, and somewhere deep inside, I felt it, something shifting, something that had been quiet for far too long. My father sat at the head of the table, posture straight, expression fixed in that familiar mixture of pride and restraint. He cut the cake carefully, passed slices with a polite smile, and never once looked in my direction. The rhythm of family conversation flowed around him, as if I were a guest who'd arrived unannounced. Daniel talked about his latest training rotation, the people he'd met, the brotherhood of service. Meg nodded and offered soft little gasps of admiration. Her voice tuned to flatter. I chewed quietly, watching their words build a wall around me. At some point, the conversation tilted toward me. Still up north? Meg asked as she poured more wine. Mostly, I said. Maine's quieter. Daniel let out a short laugh. Quiet's one word for it. I lifted my eyes to meet his. And what's your word, Daniel? He shrugged. Casual but sharp, isolation. But hey, if it works for you. The sound in the room thinned. My father set his knife down with a faint clink. Enough. I smiled. The kind you wear to keep your jaw from trembling. It's fine. Dad, we all find peace differently. Outside, rain began to tap against the roof, soft at first, then steadier. The TV flickered in the living room, its blue glow cutting through the dim dining light. A weather reporter's voice bled through static. Hurricane Kestrel expected to make landfall within 12 hours. I looked up just long enough to catch the red circle spinning on the map. Charleston, Sector Bravo. The coordinates punched through my calm like a nail through glass. That was one of ours. Daniel lifted his glass. Oblivious. Guess even the storm's joining the party. I forced a smile, but my palms were slick with sweat. The storm wasn't out there anymore. It was here, crawling quietly across the table, waiting for the right second to strike. Meg started clearing plates, while Daniel scrolled through his phone, still talking about promotions. The air smelled of candles, rain, and something metallic I couldn't name. Then it came, 2 short vibrations, 1 long. The rhythm hit me like a reflex I'd spent years trying to forget. I dropped my napkin, bending quickly as my hand covered the phone. A thin line of text glowed beneath the linen. Omega-3 priority. Verify Admiral Echo. My pulse stumbled. At that exact moment, the silver pendant around my neck began to glow faintly red. Not bright, just sharp enough to slice through the candlelight. I pressed my fingers over it, but a small voice broke the silence. Aunt Avery, your necklace is glowing. Every head turned. Meg laughed, unaware of the chill that ran through me. New fashion tech? Just something from work, I said, forcing calm into every syllable. Helps with stress. My father's gaze lingered on me, slow and assessing. Looks military. I set my palm flat over the pendant until the light dimmed. Old habit. Daniel leaned forward, smirking. You really can't let go, can you? I didn't answer. My heartbeat fell into rhythm with the code pulsing in my mind. Red for urgency, blue for confirmation, green for deploy. On the TV. The reporter's tone shifted. The Coast Guard has lost contact with an offshore rescue command. The words passed through the room without meaning to anyone but me. They went back to their wine and laughter. I sat still, every muscle alert. The signal wasn't a coincidence. It was a summons. I had promised to respond only when every other option failed. And tonight, as the wind howled against the windows, I knew. Every option had failed. Somewhere off Charleston's coast, a mission was unraveling, and the code on my screen carried the one name no one in this house would ever believe belonged to me. Admiral Echo. The smell of red wine mixed with the chill drifting in from the bay. We had finished dinner, but the sound of cutlery tapping porcelain felt heavier with every passing second. Each ring of silver against china stretched time-thin, like the moment before a storm breaks. Daniel lifted his glass high, his voice full of pride. Here's to Dad, the man who gave 25 honorable years to the Navy, the kind of service that means something. Then he turned to me. Not everyone can say the same. The air froze. My father's eyes flickered toward him, then away again as he took a sip. Silent as always. Meg forced a laugh, desperate to deflect. The storm's really picking up, isn't it? No one answered, I said evenly. There's more than one way to serve. Daniel snorted. Yeah? Paperwork doesn't count. The knife slipped from my fingers, clattering loud enough to silence the room. You think you understand service? I kept my voice low. You wouldn't last a night where I've been. He laughed, shaky but defiant. Where you've been? In Maine? Fixing boats? My father's grip tightened around his glass until it cracked. Enough. Both of you. But something inside me had already shifted. Then, through the TV's static, came the faint pulse of Morse code. Echo 14. Priority call. My heart stalled. No one else noticed. It wasn't random interference. It was a signal. My father squinted. You heard something? Just interference, I said, steady. Daniel smirked. Still jumpy about old signals, huh? Some habits keep people alive. I answered. Thunder rolled overhead, deep and deliberate. My body knew before my mind did. It wasn't thunder. The storm outside wasn't just weather. Sector Bravo, the rescue base I once commanded, had gone dark. The message used my personal ID, Admiral Echo 7. They weren't calling for help. They were calling for me. Wind slammed the window, making the glasses tremble. Rain drummed on the roof in the same rhythm that had haunted me for a decade. 10 years ago, in the North Atlantic, our rescue plane was torn apart by a cyclone. We're losing altitude, then blackness. Reed Lawson dragged me from the wreck, while 8 others vanished beneath the waves. Only 2 of us survived. I swore I'd never let another team die under my command. Still daydreaming. Avery? Daniel's voice dragged me back, just remembering what storms can do. He smirked. You wouldn't know a real storm if it hit you. I met his gaze. I know what it's like to bury people you couldn't save. Silence spread. My father's face changed, something between fear and realization. He'd once heard rumors about Project Tide. Now, hearing me, he knew it hadn't ended. The TV flickered again. Coastal base losing signal. Navy rescue units on standby. Outside, the wind roared. My mind calculated instinctively. Wind direction, rotor speed, landing range. You act like you still matter in that world, Daniel muttered. I never stopped mattering. My father rose, voice unsteady. What's going on? Duty? I said. A violent gust blew out the candles, drowning the room in darkness. Then my phone buzzed. 3 short, 1 long, the final code. They were coming. I looked at their faces. My father, my brother, my family, all still blind to the truth. They thought the storm was outside. They didn't know it was already here. The wind screamed against the glass, a metallic shriek that made the windows tremble, like the house itself was gasping for air. Daniel turned on the TV, and the screen flashed black before stabilizing into a chaotic live feed. Waves taller than buildings slammed into a Navy outpost. The reporter's voice cracked through static. Communication lost. Evacuation unconfirmed. My chest tightened. Sector Bravo. The base I once commanded. My father's voice cut through the noise. Avery, you look pale. What is it? I didn't answer. My mind was already mapping wind direction, radar range, helicopter corridors, calculations I hadn't made aloud in years. Then I heard it. A low, pulsing thrum rolling through the walls, steady and mechanical. Not thunder. Couldn't be thunder. I stood up slowly, pulse syncing with that deep vibration. Daniel frowned. What are you doing? Listening. The sound grew heavier, closer. The wine glasses on the table began to tremble. The chandelier swayed above us. My father pushed back his chair, his voice rising. That's not thunder. No, sir. It's an approach. Meg clutched Emma to her chest, her voice sharp with panic. Avery, what did you do? Nothing. They're coming for me. The front windows burst inward with the next gust. A flash of white light swept across the room, shaking the framed photographs on the wall. Leaves spiraled in, plates shattered. Wind howled like a living thing. The sound outside deepened into a roar that reached inside your ribs and held on. Emma screamed. I grabbed her and pulled her to the floor, shielding her as glass rattled around us. Stay low, I whispered. Even though my own heartbeat was hammering loud enough to drown everything else, Daniel shouted over the chaos. What the hell is that? Avery, back up. The floor vibrated, each rotation of the rotor pounding through the ground beneath us. The front door rattled violently, and then came 3 sharp knocks, steady, strong, deliberate. Every soldier in the room froze. Even my father recognized it. That's a military knock, he said softly. Yes, sir. For me. His face drained of color. Daniel stared blankly, unsure if this was still real life or some hallucination the storm had dragged in. I bent down beside Emma. Stay with your mom. Then I crossed the flooded floor, the water cold against my bare feet. My hand gripped the doorknob, metal biting against my skin like ice. I turned it. The door blew open under the force of the wind. Rain lashed my face, sharp as sand. The roar outside filled my ears. An MH-60 Seahawk descending into the yard, its searchlights slicing through the night like blades. The American flag on the porch whipped so violently it looked frozen mid-air. A figure dropped from the aircraft and jogged toward the porch through the downpour. Reed Lawson. His flight suit clung to him, soaked and streaked with mud. He climbed the steps and pounded 3 more times against the frame, firm and precise. I pulled the door open wide, the wind tearing at the curtains behind me. Reed's eyes met mine, Admiral Collins, he shouted over the thunder of the rotors. Command requests immediate deployment. Sector Bravo's underwater. Behind me. Everything went still. Daniel's glass slipped from his hand, shattering across the floor. Meg pulled Emma closer. My father stood motionless in the doorway, his mouth open, but no sound coming out. Admiral? He whispered, as if the word itself betrayed him. Yes, sir, I said. Reed nodded once. We've got less than 10 minutes. Ma'am? The radio on his shoulder crackled, and through the static came a voice I hadn't heard in years. Captain Marshall, my father's former commanding officer, the man who once saved his life. His signal was faint, drowning. My father stumbled a step forward. How is this possible? Because not all uniforms are visible, I said quietly. Daniel's face twisted in disbelief. You're Admiral Echo? You wanted to know what I've been doing all these years. This is it. Reed touched his earpiece, his voice steady. Admiral, the fleet's waiting for your go. I turned back toward my father. He looked at me a long moment, rain and light reflected in his eyes. Then he straightened his shoulders, the posture of a man who'd spent a lifetime giving orders, and said the only words that mattered. Then go. Bring them home. The phrase struck like thunder. His old motto, passed down through generations, now handed to me. I stepped out onto the porch, the floodlight washing over my face. Reed reached out a gloved hand to shield me from the wind, guiding me toward the metal steps. Rain stung my skin, hair whipping into my eyes, but inside I felt only stillness. As I climbed, I glanced back one last time. My family stood in the bright glare, small, silent, faces pale but changed. There was no scorn left in their eyes, only stunned quiet and something that looked almost like pride. I raised my hand in a crisp salute, the motion cutting clean through the storm. For the first time in years, no one laughed. I didn't need their apologies. Only this moment, when truth stood taller than every denial ever spoken. Wind slammed into my face as I stepped off the porch, the air thick with rain and the thunder of spinning blades. The Seahawk's searchlight swept across the yard, turning the house into a white blur against the storm. For a heartbeat, it felt like the sky itself had come for me. Reed raised a hand to his headset. Command is waiting for your go. Admiral! I tightened my helmet strap and moved toward the light. Each step felt like leaving behind 12 years of judgment. Behind me, my father gripped the doorway, his silver hair whipping in the wind. Daniel stood silent beside him, Meg clutching Emma close. Their eyes followed me, the same eyes that once looked down on me, now wide with disbelief. I reached for the radio on Reed's shoulder. This is Admiral Collins. Initiate full tide formation. Authorization code Delta Omega 7. The reply came through the static. Copy that. Admiral. Fleet moving in. Welcome back. Let's bring them home. The rotors whipped the flag straight, the red, white, and blue blazing against the rain. I turned to my father. He lifted his hand in a perfect salute. I returned it, wordless. Through the roar, I saw his lips form 3 quiet words. Proud of you, Admiral. No apology could have meant more. The Seahawk lifted, pulling me into the storm, back to the sky, where silence isn't escape, but power. The Seahawk steadied as we rose above the worst of the turbulence. Rain streaked across the glass, bright under the rotating beams of the searchlight. I stripped off my gloves and switched to the emergency channel. The screen flared to life. Sector Bravo, submerged. 48 personnel missing. Reed's voice came through the headset. Calm but urgent. Command's ready for your orders, ma'am. I pressed the mic button, my voice steady. Deploy Task Force Delta. Form grid rescue at coordinates 26 north. Bring back every last one. The radio filled with the synchronized reply of multiple crews. Copy that, Admiral. The echo rolled through the cabin, powerful as thunder. Reed turned his head slightly, a faint grin behind the exhaustion. Never thought I'd fly for you again. Neither did I. But here we are. The radar light washed over his face, painting him in silver and green. Outside, The sea raged, a field of white foam and dark water crashing beneath us. The world looked both furious and alive. I glanced through the window. The coastline was only a thin shimmer now. Somewhere below, my father's house stood against the wind, small but unbroken. I spoke softly to the glass, knowing he couldn't hear me. "You were wrong about me, but it's okay. I was wrong too. I thought I needed you to see me." Static burst through my headset, then a voice. Captain Marshall located, alive. Tears mixed with the rain on my cheek. "Then let's finish what he started." "Orders!" "Admiral?" Reed asked. "Full rescue sweep. No one left behind." The Seahawk banked hard, plunging back into the storm. Lightning flared across the sky, and for the first time in years, I felt aligned with it, returning not just to duty, but to who I'd always been. The storm had broken by the time dawn crept over the horizon. A pale silver light spilled through the cockpit window, catching the trembling in my hands, the leftover pulse of adrenaline and cold. The sky was calm now, but the air still hummed with the ghost of thunder. Reed's voice came quietly through the headset. "Operation complete. Survivors secured. Captain Marshall en route to base." I closed my eyes, breathing deeply. Beneath the steady hum of the rotors, I could still hear my father's voice echo in my mind. "Bring them home." I unfastened my helmet and looked out the window. Below, the sea stretched wide and calm, the coastline of Charleston glimmering faintly in the morning light. The first rays of sun pierced through the last bands of cloud, striking the blades of the helicopter until they gleamed like polished steel. "Admiral Collins," Reed said. "Charleston Tower cleared your path. You're free to land." I smiled faintly. "No, Reed. Keep flying." He frowned. "To where?" "Doesn't matter. I just want to stay above the storm a little longer." The silver chain at my neck caught the sunlight. It no longer pulsed red, only shimmered quietly. Peaceful. For years I believed silence meant being forgotten. Now I knew silence could also mean being understood. The clouds thinned, revealing the sun in full, golden and vast. I whispered into the fading roar. Mission accomplished. Finally, the Seahawk banked east, slicing through the soft morning air. As we disappeared into the horizon, the world below blurred into light, and I understood, sometimes, to be truly seen, you have to vanish into the sky.